All right, we still have people popping in. If everybody can, if you can go into your name. So on Zoom, most of you hopefully know how this works. Go to your picture. There's 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner. Click on that and go down to rename. And if you can just put your name and then who you're with or where you're at, so we can kind of understand the flavor of who we have in the room, that would be awesome. And I'm going ahead and going to kick up Jimmy Scheid's off camera. No problem, Jimmy. Jimmy's in California. He is a graduate of the 2022 Institute. Oh, hey, Melinda, a few people from Casey Trees, perfect. So I'm gonna start by sharing my screen. I promise we're not just gonna do a PowerPoint deck this whole time, but we're gonna start with that to kind of center us on our plan for the day. So thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna go ahead and get started. We have an hour and a half for this because I think there's gonna be a lot of great conversation and we don't want to cut that off. So I promise it won't be a long lingering hour and a half. If we get done sooner, we'll cut it off, but we wanted to leave plenty of time for discussion. One, for the whole tree captain story, and also for Green Communities Leadership Institute. So welcome everybody. My name's Lance Davison. I live in Boise, Idaho. I am a member of the core leadership team of the Green Communities Leadership Institute. And I also help with the City of Trees Challenge in Boise, which is where our Boise Tree Captains program was generated from. With me, I have Meg Morgan. Meg is with Boise Nashville and a graduate of Green Communities Leadership Institute. And she's also helping us this year on our team as our outreach and communications person. Meg's awesome, work a lot with her. So we'll talk a bit about how our relationship and working together has evolved through Green Communities Leadership Institute. And we have Asia Doughton with us. Asia is new to our core leadership team. She's at Michigan State University, and she's going to be our panel moderator. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about our 2 programs briefly, and then Asia is going to interview us on a panel with our special guest, Ingrid Campbell. Ingrid is a longtime neighborhood planting captain with the Root Nashville campaign. So thank you so much for meeting us today, Ingrid, and sharing your story. So we will kick on into it from here. All right, so today's conversation will start a little bit with Green Communities Leadership Institute. Feel free, as you have questions, to either raise your hand or to pop it in the chat. Meg and I will kind of be the co-hosts of this, so I'll be running the slide deck and probably talking more than you'd like. Meg will be in the background making sure that that we're capturing all your questions. So we want this to be a conversation, not just a presentation. In the beginning, we're going to introduce our 2 programs a little bit, and then we're going to have our conversation led by Asia, and finally we'll get into the conversation with all of you. This is us actually in Oregon. So when you look at the Green Communities Leadership Institute, you'll notice that we're trying to do everything we can to get outside, have really active and engaged conversations so that you're not just sitting getting lectured at all the time. It's a very different leadership experience and training than I think you would be used to traditionally. Our mission is to grow next level leaders focused on building nature-based solutions. 1, improving your own personal leadership skills. 2, working within your community, and 3, within your organization. So those 3 key pieces are what kind of frame our curriculum. We're a shared leadership model, and we're really focused on building diversity within our industry through this. And it really is, it's a journey for all of us. I feel like the core leadership team learns just as much, if not more, than the students and the cohort that are involved. So it's going to be, like I said, very different than us standing in a lectern speaking to you all the time. The format is 3 separate sessions. Right now we have the recruitment open. That will close September 30th. And then we will let folks know if they were selected in November. We have 3 sessions in January. It's all online self-directed learning. And every Friday we have everybody jumps into a Zoom and we have a conversation with the speakers of that week. In February, we have 1 week of live webinars. And in March, we will be in person. I think it's the 2nd week in March in Knoxville, Tennessee. And we hope that what you gain from this is expanded personal leadership competencies, expanded opportunity to impact your organization, and also to impact your community. And I think we might have somebody that's not on mute, so if you could mute, that would be slick. We actually started this institute back in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. We realized with all the stresses that we were facing with how that pandemic kind of collapsed our society in a number of ways, that we need to provide a leadership opportunity for those of us that have already been in our career for several years, probably went to some different leadership trainings, and we wanted to give you an opportunity to advance to the next level. We recruited last spring. We had a cohort of, I think, 25 to 30 folks, had a great institute. There are several of our cohort members here on this call, so you can talk to them and learn from them throughout this. And our plan is to continue to do this every year. You'll notice that there are several of our cohort members that are now on our core leadership team. So you have an opportunity to immediately step up and influence our Leadership Institute when you are complete with the experience. I'd encourage you to go to our website. It's www.greencommunitiesleadership.org. We can pop that in the chat for you. And remember that our applications are currently open. They're due September 30th. And you want to plan a little bit of time, because part of that application is 2 letters of reference that you need to get from people within your sphere. And now I will jump into, let's see.
I work more on my phone.
A little bit in the chat. Still somebody not muted, so check that. Now we're going to jump into our coffee with the tree captains. So like I mentioned, I'm with the Boise Tree Captains, and we started this project in 2020. So we'll talk about how that grew. And really our inspiration was Root Nashville and their neighborhood tree planting campaign. So we'll let Meg go ahead and.
All right, already.
Yeah, great. And I am going to lovingly call someone out very quickly. Victoria with Speak for the Trees. Very glad that you are here. And Lance, as the host, I do think you have muting capabilities, if you wouldn't mind. But Victoria, if you're with us, if you wouldn't mind muting, please. Or Lance, if you could try to mute that one. Are you able to do that, Lance?
That wasn't too good.
My reception used to be great.
All right, beautiful. Thanks, y'all. So as Lance said, my name is Meg Morgan, and I am with the Root Nashville campaign here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'll get into kind of the specifics of this model and program and kind of some of the lessons learned along the way, but I'll start with just a little bit of background and context first for where this program exists and a little bit of how it got started. So our Neighborhood Planting Captain program is in support of the Root Nashville planting campaign. So Root Nashville is not a standalone organization. It's set up as a campaign, as a movement, we like to call it, something that everybody can be a part of in Nashville. And it has this very big goal of canopying and restoring our urban forest in Nashville by planting 500,000 trees by 2050. So big, ambitious goal, plenty of job security that comes along with that. But it's structured technically as a public-private partnership. So it's led by a nonprofit, the Cumberland River Compact. So that's where I work as the campaign manager, but it's also a partnership of the city of Nashville as well. So that's where that public piece comes in. It originally started with interest from the community way back in, I want to say 2016, 2017. Our city led a study about, the current kind of state of the environment and livability in Nashville and where we are. And some data that came out of that was that Nashville is losing thousands and thousands of trees every year, as are many other cities, unfortunately, in the United States. And people really responded strongly to that and really kind of stepped up and said, we need to do something about this. And so a few years later, when the city had the opportunity to work with consultants from Bloomberg Associates, they kind of tracked down a private philanthropy measure that could help support the early years of the campaign. So we were pretty lucky and fortunate in that early in the Root Nashville campaign, our operations were funded, but really did exist with this goal of restoring our canopy, planting 500,000 trees by 2050. But here in Nashville, we're a southern city here in Tennessee, and some of what that means, and there's kind of similar with other cities in this area, is that the vast majority of the land itself is actually privately owned here in Nashville. 94% of the land is privately owned in Nashville. So the Root Nashville campaign launched in October of 2018, and pretty early on realized that we need a strategy for getting trees on private property because it's the vast majority of the land, and it is where a lot of the tree loss is happening. So we had a lot of kind of early iterations, of this program, and it has grown tremendously thanks to our neighborhood leaders. But this is the program that we created in order to address this need of getting trees planted on private property. And that is the Neighborhood Planting Captain Program. Lance, you can go to the next slide. So how it works is a neighborhood leader applies to be a captain. To be very honest, it's not a very selective process. We work with almost everyone who applies to be a captain, although at different levels, we do have high priority environmental justice areas that receive additional resources and support. But you apply to be a captain, and then if you're accepted into the program, you get a certain number of trees for your neighborhood. It's usually 50 to 60 trees, and the captain's job is to spread the word to their own neighbors in their own neighborhood about the fact that free trees are available for their neighborhood. So it is very much a kind of peer-to-peer kind of grassroots program and model where people who live within the neighborhoods themselves are telling their own neighbors, hey, I'm signing up for trees. Here's why you should too. Here's how you can do it. Kind of walk them through the process and maybe share some of the benefits of trees along the way. We don't require that anyone is a tree expert by any means to be a tree captain. We tell them that all the time. We say, all you need to do is be someone who is willing to talk to your neighbors, willing to spread the word. You do have to like trees, at least a little bit to be a planting captain. But you're responsible for getting the word out and guiding people to a link that we create that's specific for your neighborhood. So we try to make it as easy as possible for the captains by providing them materials that they can use in their outreach efforts. We do kind of printed flyers, but also digital graphics and things as well. And we have resources that they can go to. And we started just this past planting season doing cohorts with trainings that kind of bring everybody up to speed kind of all at once as a group about how the program works and the benefits of trees and kind of talking points that other captains have found worked really well for their own neighborhood as well. So the captain's job, once they found homes for those 50 or 60 trees, is mostly that's the job, is getting the word out and guiding people towards the link. And then our team from that point forward in the planting season then delivers the trees straight to people's yards who ordered them, front yard or backyard. Lance, if you could go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to kind of share a couple stories and some photos of some of our past and current neighborhood planting captains. It is an incredibly diverse group in kind of all senses of the word, and that is something that we are super proud of. So just to kind of share some stories about some of these folks. This is Danny Lowe, who's wearing the black mask and the cap right here in the sweatshirt. He actually came to us from a youth climate summit originally as a student in high school and became a planting captain soon after he graduated. He's actually been a planting captain multiple times now, and he lives in one of our high impact areas of environmental justice. And he's actually Ukrainian and lives in an area where there are high, kind of higher than average percentage of immigrants. But then, he's very young. And then we also have people who have lived in there. This is Mr. George Acklin. He has been in the Parkwood neighborhood for over 50 years, knows everybody knows him. He's been mowing this common area probably that entire 50 years. And actually we started working with him because he is a beautification commissioner, and he wanted to organize some street trees in that area that he was mowing because he was tired of mowing it. And so we worked with him to make that happen, and then I brought him along as a neighborhood planting captain for his neighborhood as well. But we have, Alan in the back here, who's an architect, Ryan is with the Sunrise Movement. Jaffe is with another environmental nonprofit, and we partnered together, two organizations, to kind of make this tree planting thing happen in the neighborhood. So it really is a very, very broad and diverse group of people who are working for the benefit of their own neighborhood. And we are very fortunate. We'll be asking to hear from one of our fabulous planting captains here shortly, Ingrid Campbell, who is also here with us, who has gotten trees for her neighborhood, but also schools and daycares and like plenty of other sites. So we've been working together in multiple ways. Something that has happened pretty organically with this group. We had 6 cohorts of planting captains so far since launching this program in 2020. And as much as possible, we are listening to what they advise as how the program can improve and things that we can change and update. And one of the things that they had mentioned was, especially as the pandemic kind of calmed down a little bit, they wanted more interaction with one another. So we said, okay, we can make that happen. So we've started bringing them together for things like, happy hours or kind of informal get-togethers. And also wanted to mention, this program was officially launched before the Green Communities Leadership Institute experience and the program that I went to as a grad. But I got so much out of that then kind of applied directly to this program. And one of those things I just wanted to mention was how important relationships are to get anything done, but I think especially to get community work done, how important those relationships are. That's something that was a really big takeaway for me with the GCLI experience, was kind of meeting this really cool, really interesting, really inspiring group of people doing kind of similar work across the country and learning from them and their ideas, but also the relationships and the fun that came out of that. So we really tried to apply some of those lessons to our neighborhood planting captain program. I think that is my last slide, Lance, but if you want to go to the next one. Okay, I will officially hand things back off to you, but we'll be chatting more about both of our programs throughout.
Perfect. Thank you, Meg. And to dovetail off the GCLI experience, I think we were trying to talk before this, how Meg and I met. We met through colleagues before we even got involved in the Green Communities Leadership Institute. And Meg's exactly correct. By that relationship that we developed helped us to advance our programs well far beyond where we would have imagined. So the really cool thing about the GCLI experience is you're going to develop really deep relationships with people that are doing similar things at other places in the country, possibly in the world. We have a few international candidates as well. And it makes it more fun. We can challenge each other to do things better. And we really are addressing really challenging issues with climate action, addressing equity, and it helps to have a village to help you get there. So this is a good story of how we've done that. So my name is Lance Davison. I am director and president of the Treasure Valley Canopy Network, which is the lead nonprofit partner in the City of Trees Challenge. This really started very different from the campaign in Nashville. City Council President Elaine Clegg, who's right here, came up with the idea pre-pandemic of planting 1 tree for every household within the city of Boise, 1 urban tree, and 1 forest seedling for every resident in Boise, really as a call to climate action so that every citizen could be involved and engaged. And I remember when she did, the city forestry department was probably less excited, more scared of how in the world would we do that. And quickly, actually, the day after it was announced, Elaine called me and said, hey, we need a nonprofit partner. We need that partnership to make this work. So that's where it started, and it's grown to a great organic success in the last 3 years because of those partnerships. We have City of Boise leading alongside the Treasure Valley Canopy Network and the Nature Conservancy in Idaho to make all this work. So that's the foundation of the Tree Captains. We started back in 2020. The pandemic made us kind of shift what we were doing a little bit, but it made us focus even more on economic development opportunities and addressing needs in our community, which was a really positive thing. I think one of our strong foundations is the data and relationships that were built before the challenge even started. So we've been working with the city of Boise for over 10 years, helping address urban heat issues, air quality issues. And so when Council President Clegg came to us, we were really ready to pick up the ball and make this happen so that it was more than just planting and counting trees. It's important to plant trees, but we always say we need to plan for, plant, and care for those trees over time. So one interesting thing when we're talking about raising money, we are raising $5 to plant every forest seedling in order to plan for, plant, and grow that trees. And for the urban trees, we're raising $400 for each tree. And people often just, their eyes go wide open because they say, well, wait a minute, doesn't it cost $1 to plant a tree? No, it does not. So we are really focused on changing that dialogue because it's critically important. You see here our first tree captains training. It's a diverse group, a few high school students. It was really fun to see, similar to what Meg was talking about, our volunteers, a few of them are from a tree care company or have planted trees before. Most of them are really active in their community and want to help, knew nothing about planting trees. So I think that's one important success, is find those engaged citizen volunteers and work with them, because they're the ones that are going to help you get way beyond any tree group that you ever worked with. This is a look at our applications. We got I think over 30 applications. We definitely don't have all 30 super engaged. Some are more engaged than others, but it's really well distributed throughout the city. When we're talking about equity, we use tools like the Tree Equity Index from American Forests, and we're really focusing in this area based off of our air quality, urban tree canopy, urban heat, and equity tools on where we need our trees planted most. It's in the middle of an interstate. It is devoid of tree canopy, and that's where we're focusing our efforts. The U.S. Forest Service has been a huge supporter as well, allowing us to get tools for our tree captains. And we also created a handbook that we learned a lot from Meg and how they did their handbook. And that's here. They can have it in their back pockets, a really helpful, useful tool. So it's been fun to continue to engage our community through all that. And just like Meg was saying, fun is really important. We have socials once a month. We have one of our folks does a lot of walking throughout her neighborhood. So we actually got each of our volunteers one of these temperature sensors. And it's really powerful. If you don't have one, I recommend you get one, because when you're walking through a neighborhood with somebody and you shine that in an area that's not shaded, and then in an area that's shaded, this is a difference of 120 degrees in the sun and 77 degrees in the shade. And that really clicks in people's mind of, oh, okay, urban heat's an issue and trees can help solve that. So we have a ton of fun. We're growing organic relationships and opportunities, and that's what's going to make it successful over time. And now let's kick over to the moderated discussion. So I'm going to get out of our slide deck and we're going to turn it over to Asia. Please populate your questions in the chat or raise your hand. And thank you everybody for putting your email address. If you want to follow up email here, throw your email address in the chat and we'll capture that for you. So Asia, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lance. And thank you, Meg, both of you all for sharing about your experiences in developing and running these tree captain programs in Boise and Nashville. And you all have generated a lot of conversations or a lot of thoughts and questions for me internally. And I'm hoping we can spend the next few minutes really thinking through some of the successes and challenges and additional experiences you all have had through the years. So let's just kick things off. Lance, one thing you mentioned is that you had a lot of engagement, not just from the tree planting groups in the community, but specifically those engaged members of the community who may not necessarily be trained in urban forestry, but they had an interest in the work that was being done. And it really makes me wonder, when we think about community engagement, whether it's in Boise or Nashville, LA, New York, Lansing, Michigan, it's a really increasingly growing term, community engagement, in this green and sustainability-based mindset that so many communities are walking in. So that being said, my question for the panel is, on a personal level, how do you define community engagement from your own perspective?
Do you want to go first, Meg?
I'll jump in, yeah. So as much as possible, we really try to think about community engagement as deep listening, and then kind of letting we work on so much on a neighborhood scale, neighborhood level, really following the community or the neighborhood's lead on what they want and what they're interested in for their own neighborhood. It's where they live. So I would say our approach to that is to try to connect the resources and the programs that we have to what the community is, and listening to find out what that need is. And I'm actually going to turn it over, if I can pick on my friend and co-conspirator, Ingrid Campbell, who's one of our planting captains. Ingrid is a longtime community volunteer for many different kinds of causes, but always about creating and connecting community in her own neighborhood, has been a past neighborhood association president, is an award winner, y'all, for her work in her neighborhood from a neighborhood association nonprofit. So I'll take a moment to embarrass her with that. But Ingrid, as a captain, but also with, the other kinds of volunteer work that you do for your neighborhood, I'm going to ask the same question, like how would you define it? And I know I'm going to learn from you in this too.
Well, thank you for me, part of the panel. Thank you for embarrassing me, not only within Nashville, beyond the state boundaries. We'll just take that to a whole nother level. What's your question? I'm on a micro level, but I have to go from the micro level to a larger span because I try to engage people in different realms. So one is understanding the community, understanding the community's history, understanding the community's needs, and to see beyond today, looking 5, 10, 20 years out. All right. There are people who've been here, they don't have the history part is knowing what has occurred in the neighborhood. Like, yes, it's an area that no one really invested in the proper trees or landscaping for the community. So we have 50 years of that trying to correct. The second part is the neighbors have endured weather tragedies. So there's that kind of mentality, fear that you have to deal with, right? The third is there are also seniors here. Okay, you have trees, you got to maintain them, and who's going to do that now that I'm 70, 80 years old? And then the fourth is just these, because we're such a hot spot. I mean, we're a walking distance from the Titan Stadium. And so everybody wants to come here, but they have different mindset, or they don't have a mindset of thinking about the community, more so the developers, than someone who's just moving to where they live or the relatives are here or whatever. And they may be more engaged. So kind of getting everybody on the same page it's like herding cats, as you say. But here's the thing. Trees are important to our environment. They offer value that you may not see as tangible, but let's talk about how this really does affect you. Okay. If you're a senior, you've been in the area, you have during the summertime, you may have have to deal with the heat, right? So how do you handle that? Oh, we don't have central air in our house. We just have window air conditioning units. But I noticed in your backyard, you have this lovely oak tree that's covering your house and the neighbor's house. Oh yes, I get all these leaves and stuff. It's like, oh, okay. So do you know if you remove that tree, how that would adversely affect you? Oh, well, I don't have anybody. Well, maybe that's what we need to do as a neighborhood, is get someone to just kind of clean your yard and things. Let us work on that part as a community. Okay, so now that's how the roots start to go out. And we're starting to hit other areas. I understand, but I got to get trees in this neighborhood. It's hot. I don't like asphalt. It's hot. So it goes on and on. I don't want to just bombard you, but it's things like that we need to really take in, that I need to engage people and have other people understand, look beyond just you as a unit, because you're really not a unit. You know, so there you go.
Thank you, Ingrid. McFerrin Park's lucky to have you.
Thank
Asia, do you want me to go for Boise? Build off that?
Yeah, you're welcome to. And then I see Danny's got his hand up as well.
Yeah, so Danny, you go ahead. For people's benefit, we've got Danny Roop, who is the lead city partner on City of Trees Challenge that I work with a lot. And we also have the city forester, Mike Andrews, here. So yes, Danny.
Yeah, that was great, Ingrid. And that, I think that touched on a lot of things that we've sort of struggled with as well in our tree planting programs as well. What came to mind first when you said community engagement is we have, an Office of Community Engagement in the city of Boise. And it's interesting because, they, as an office, they support a lot of these smaller programs that deal directly with the communities, but on a day-to-day basis, a lot of times what they're doing is more marketing, of the city and its programs and things like that. But they really rely on the other departments to go out and work with the community on this more micro scale and build these interactions and have these relationships with the community on a more personal level. And I see that as kind of what we're doing in community engagement, and kind of the scheme of the broader community engagement of the city is really providing that one-to-one interaction with the community. So it's been amazing working with all of our volunteers. We have people who are just so committed to this and so generous with their time, and connected with their communities, and they're becoming more connected with their communities through this program as well, which is really fun to see, and fun to hear about. So yeah, I don't know if that builds a picture of what community engagement is, but that had just been my experience with this sort of foray into broader community engagement. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great, Danny. And I love what both Meg and Ingrid said about listening. We knew when we started the City of Trees Challenge, we didn't really launch the tree captains until this year. We just hadn't got the capacity up to do it. And we knew that the way that you truly do community engagement is not marketing and sending out all your information. It's going and listening and spending time in the community. And so many times cities have messed up community engagement when they parachute in and say, hey, we have this great new program, and guess what? We picked you. You get to plant trees, here you go. And even though we knew that, it takes a long time to build that, right? So we did all this analysis and knew the areas that we wanted to focus. And then we sent this recruitment out for our tree captains. And I think what was really fun to see is organically, and I think it's because we've been doing this work in the city for over 10 years now, a lot of groups, City of Good is one group of great volunteers that we worked at the farmers market with early on in this project. And they just are great volunteers. They love working in the community. They're focused on food forests. They're focused on getting healthy food out to all parts of the neighborhood and growing the agriculture community. They're actually the ones that are going to help us plant on private property. Meg, you talked about the difficulty is planting on private property. The city and the Canopy Network, we can stand up the plans, but we need somebody else to actually go plant on private property. So we partnered with City of Good, and they're one of those people that kind of came out of the woodwork with our recruitment. So it's growing and we're evolving and adapting it. But my favorite way to spend time in a community is to just go to some meetings, spend some time, sit in the back and listen. They maybe don't know who you are for the first few times. And then once you've learned enough, you can say, oh, like you were saying, Ingrid, you're worried about your house being hot in the middle of the summer, and what does that tree really do to shade it? But it's just, I see it done so wrong so many times when we start a program that got federal funding or whatever, and we parachute in. And then, like Ingrid was saying, we disappear after 2 years because the money dried up, and we just lost even more trust in the community. So I think at a national level, we really also need to be talking about, if you're going to truly fund a program that's going to make a difference in the community, it can't be 1 or 2 years. I mean, we're excited because this is a 10-year initiative. And to be completely honest with you, if we are having major success with tree captains at year 5 or 6, that would be maybe even unexpected. You need upwards of 10 years just to get to where it's going to last and make a difference. So there are a ton of challenges to doing this the right way, but looping back to the relationship with Meg and learning from a lot of folks, we've got Melinda at Casey Trees, who's a graduate of GCLI. We're learning a ton from you, and that's how we make it better and really truly address community engagement.
Yeah, that just brought something else to mind for me. You know, we talk a lot about going to the neighborhood association meetings and these other community meetings, but you know, other partnerships that have been really valuable for us are just our partnerships with local businesses, local organizations. Those are all just have made the City of Trees Challenge, our tree planting initiative, so much stronger and I think more robust, and it reaches so many more people that way.
I will add another just kind of angle of it. One of the things that maybe come from being the president of the association as well, but engaging, you said businesses. Well, businesses, if you are part of an association, you go to these council meetings and so forth, you know the different plans that are coming in your surrounding area, you can have that upfront discussion with the developer or whoever's doing the developing of the land, just to understand, okay, so how about your green space? What are you planning on doing? Are you going to take that lot that has these wonderful, you know, mature trees and just clear cut the land? Or are you planning to have some areas where green space is intermingled with your project? You know, and this is the common, and you want to have this conversation up front because they may not have allocated funds for that project. So that's why I try to get involved with the development. I try to get involved also with, you know, so the businesses, get everybody in the mindset, at least when they see you, they're in the mindset, you know, of knowing that, okay, I need to really think about this more. This is important to the community. That's it.
This is just so rich. I'm just thinking about, you know, a lot of what you shared, and it's like on both ends, it seems like the initial goal is more trees in the ground, right? And that's something that's quantifiable. But it seems like really what keeps these initiatives going and then elevating them to the level where they have serious long-term impact, from like the individual person scale to the neighborhood scale, is what's intangible, not necessarily quantifiable, but it's really putting in that time to build those connections and connections with community members, between community members. And I really appreciate that point, Ingrid. It's even bigger than those who call the community home. There are those who have the financial power to change what that community looks like, and they have to be a part of the conversation and realize that
Right.
the voices of those community members is just as heavy hitting and just as important as the dollars that they're trying to invest in the community.
Right.
So it really starts with, you know, as you all shared, just listening, and then collectively using everyone's voices to promote what needs to be done for the betterment of the community. So we'll move on to our next question. And I think you all may have had some things that you shared that may have alluded to this, but if you're able to, could you maybe share a little bit more on how you've identified key stakeholders to involve in your work?
Okay, I'll go first this time. One is, like you said, understanding the community, right? So what are the components of a community? Well, you got your government, you have your businesses, you have your residents, and whatever schools or other type of entities in your community. So you start from there. So we need to have conversations, you know, to understand what is your expectation. Here's what we're trying to achieve. What are your thoughts on it? This is what you call communication, open dialogue. It's a dialogue and not a monologue. And so you're engaging people. And then from that engagement, you can build that relationship. And now people understand where you're coming from, that transparency. And now they have that trust to continue that relationship. And it helps you like that relationship becomes like a network. So now you know the key people. If you don't know the key people, they know who you are and where to go. So that's how.
I'll build on that. So I mentioned our relationship with the farmers market. When we first started, we knew that a tree captains type program would be the best way to get trees into people's hands, but we weren't quite there yet. And so it was also in the middle of the pandemic. So we found the farmers market here locally had they had pivoted, you know, it was no longer an in-person farmers market, it was drive-through, and they had it nailed down. So this is where we had the relationships, like you said, Ingrid, with local business owners that were running the farmers market. And we contacted them and said, hey, we have a tree program. We'd love to get it in people's hands. What if we use your guys' system? And they were great. They loved it. So they just popped in. It was another commodity that they popped in, was the trees. Excuse me. We came in and stood up the program, and it was the greatest group of volunteers. We had so much fun. I think actually Mike, our city forester's wife, volunteers there weekly still. And that immediately was a group that they loved our program. And so we did that, I think, for 2 years, but the challenge was those trees were not getting counted. I don't know if you guys have seen this in your programs. If you just give away a free tree, they drive off and they're like, cool, thanks. They didn't have that investment really. And so, but it was great. It promoted the program. We got great volunteer partnerships. So the farmers market was a huge one. And then City of Good actually we have a really good group of entrepreneurial business owners here who just see a need in the community and they capture that and go. And so they started what's called City of Good, which was restaurant owners and their employees who were out of work wanted to feed people that needed food. So they started the City of Good program, which ended up now being a huge engine for volunteerism. So like I said earlier, that's who's helping us plant our trees. So these are all relationships with business owners, people that are solving problems in the community. Has really nothing to do with trees. It's just we've built trust with them over time. And when they see we have a program that's going to do something for climate and to make our communities better, we come to them, they immediately are on board. So it's really building those relationships with people where we already have trust. And now our challenge, honestly, is just kind of building the capacity to keep growing it. But we have good funding support from the city. The Canopy Network has been able to raise funding with the U.S. Forest Service and several other partners. But it comes back to what Meg was talking about, relationships with people. And we can't do this by ourselves. It takes the people that live in the community.
And just going back to the original prompt, Asia, you know, in identifying which community partners we'd really like to have on board, there are community partners who are still trying to make inroads with, you know, people like local tree care companies, local nurseries. We've had some success in both of those areas, but not as much as we would like. And there are programs that we would like to expand upon and start up that just really need those partnerships. And that's one thing that we found really challenging in all this is just connecting with those local businesses and having them sort of see the opportunity to move this forward. So yeah, I would just put that out there as well. You know, when we started this up, we started working with people who already wanted to work with us, and so that was great, and that led to a lot of success in a lot of ways. You know, but there are those folks who are more hesitant to work with us as well, and finding a way to sort of make inroads with those businesses has been a little bit challenging. So.
Yeah, Danny, I think that's a great point. When we begin to prioritize making sure that we're inclusive with engaging as many voices as possible, it becomes very evident very quickly just how many voices there are and perspectives there are that should be represented around the table. So I really appreciate that point. And I actually think it's a nice segue into the next question that I have for you all. So as you know, as these initiatives get going and success becomes evident to all, and it provides momentum for the continued progress of the program. But sometimes it causes some folks from the outside looking in to maybe question, oh, why wasn't I invited to be a part of that? So for that reason, I'd like to ask you all, have you ever encountered pushback from some entities, organizations, or individuals that felt that maybe they should have been involved in your efforts and weren't necessarily given an invitation to do so?
I can start this time if that sounds good. We do hear this sometimes, and it's usually people who live in a neighborhood saying, well, why haven't you brought trees to my neighborhood? And I'm very shameless in trying to empower people like that. So I very quickly like to turn that around and say, well, we haven't had a neighborhood planting captain in your neighborhood yet. Would you like to be one? Who can you invite to bring into this process? And just kind of immediately say like, oh, you are invited, like you are a part of this as much as possible. But yeah, definitely have heard that before. And we think about that a lot in our recruitment efforts for how we get our neighborhood planting captains. So I had mentioned, we plant trees in neighborhoods all over Nashville. We work with just about, any neighborhood that would like to be involved. But in terms of our recruiting efforts for targeting areas where we really know that trees can have the most benefit, where the data shows, that's where we target our recruiting. So others kind of naturally bubble to the surface and maybe come to us on their own. But I'm glad it had been mentioned, attending community meetings and going to events and talking to everyone, asking them what neighborhood they live in, who are the leaders in your neighborhood. As we target, where we're going to do that in what we call impact areas, which are kind of identified areas of Nashville that is specifically to create a more equitable canopy. So we target our recruiting in those areas. And then this season, for the first time, we also used an environmental justice rubric to kind of decide. I don't even remember what your original question was anymore, Asia. Now I'm just riffing. I'm sorry. I'll stop riffing here in a second. But this season, because some of our impact areas, we were really proud. We were like, we have had a captain in every neighborhood in that impact area so far. Let's like cool it for a minute with them. They don't need to hear about trees every single year, year after year after year, maybe. And we knew that there were other really high need areas in the city as well, in addition to our impact areas. So alongside community members kind of created this rubric based on environmental justice measures that then community members, we have a committee that scores the applicants who want to be neighborhood planting captains. And that's how we find our highest priority areas. So don't remember what your question was, Asia, but hopefully that's helpful a little bit.
No, that was really helpful. So we're talking about, have you had pushback from folks who felt like they should have been invited to the table? And I appreciate, some of the directness that you've used in communicating with those who have, maybe raised those concerns. Anyone else want to chime in on that one?
Do you want to add to that, Danny?
Sure. Yeah, I can add to it a little bit. It's interesting. If anyone is like me, I like to have sort of my ducks in a row before I go out and start, talking to people. Like when we first started this program, it's like, well, what even is the program? Like, what are we doing? We don't even have anything to like bring to, I'm speaking specifically about like nurseries and other businesses that we wanted to engage with. And I wouldn't say we've gotten pushback from those folks that like they wanted to be involved earlier, but it's a fine line to walk between having your idea fully sort of fledged out and in a presentable form to bring to these businesses, and having too much of it sort of on paper where it's not flexible anymore and they can actually engage with it. So, I think I guess if I stepped out of this and had to do it again, I would just say there's never a point where it's too early to go out to those community pieces. It might feel like that, but if you don't have the idea fully fledged yet, that's an opportunity for them to really be part of that process, and that's that's okay as well. So that's been something that's been difficult for me just personally in this all.
Yeah, and to add to that, I don't know if we talked much about the difference between how Root Nashville campaign got started and how City of Trees Challenge got started. Ours was an idea planted by the city council president, which is awesome, but it had no funding attached to it. It had no legs other than planting that seed. So it was exciting, but it was very organic how it happened. And we had to find funding. It started with the city. And just the way that we kind of operate is, that's why I mentioned the 10 years the Canopy Network's been operating. We had the relationships to start those conversations, but I never really, it's probably just me, my style. I don't like to create something and then throw it on everybody. I want it to be organic. And so we went out to our close partners and they were a part of, like Danny said, forming that. And so the nurseries, for example, we want to get more business to the local nurseries. So we put out an advertisement for nurseries to join, and most, I don't know if it's this way in Nashville, but most of our nurseries don't have to try to sell trees. They just get sold. So they're like, why would we, yeah, sounds fun, but we don't need to work hard to do this. But we had 2 or 3 nurseries that liked working with us. And so we came up with a coupon program, which is working really well now. And all that was built off of, coming back to what Ingrid talked about, relationships and trust. They're like, huh, Danny and Lance seem like nice guys. Maybe we'll do this little extra work to get $100 off a tree. Okay. And then we worked with them and adapted it. There's so many impediments, right? With city procurement, with everything to get these things to work smoothly. So you need really trusting partners to go down this venture of having a little bit of hassle. And now they are really built in. And then maybe this gets back to your question, Asia, the question of a nursery being like, well, why aren't we involved? And we say, well, come on, join our 3 great nursery partners. But we really have relied on those early adopters, because you need the early adopters that you have that trust with and are willing to, in the beginning, it's more work. But in the end, they're helping us sell t-shirts, which raises money to plant 4 seedlings. And they're really invested. And then, kind of like Meg was talking about, we're creating something that people want to be a part of. And then those kind of next level adopters kind of come on board. So anytime people complain, that's an opportunity for them to get engaged, I think.
All right. So I haven't had the experience directly where someone felt as though they were left out. However, I've been on the other side. Okay, where and it's kind of a little bit of a segue of how Megan and I kind of got mixed into the whole tree thing. There was someone else doing trying to get the trees out to the community. I'm like, huh, really? So I was like, okay, so initially I could take it, didn't want to take it personal, but I wanted to help them because it was something I believed in. And I have been a recipient when I first moved into the community from another organization within Nashville, the Tree Foundation. And I wanted to make sure it's something that I truly believed in. And any way I can help, something that it's innate to me, I'm just totally in. So, but as that person who felt as though I should be, they should have asked me. Well, first of all, you got to know that, you should ask this person, but it's also me just engaging people so they know the things that were important in my life. So they'll know, hey, I know we talked about this in the past. You think this is something you'd be interested in, Meg? And that's what, and then here we are. So yeah, sometimes you have to just again, listen to people and find out, and it also helps if they kind of let it be known their position, things that they are passionate about. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, so I think, consistent among everyone's response on this one is going back to what we've started this whole conversation about, like, again, listening, identifying, observing, see who's buying into things, who's not. And I think through the listening, through the observations, there's messages that we can pick up on. And in the same respect, as we work to engage our community members and tree relating efforts, other efforts for community well-being, again, there's messaging that we are trying to, promote, but also receive as the work is getting done. And so it makes you think about all the different ways that communication can take place, whether that's effective or less than effective. So my next question for you all is based on the whole concept of communicating with community members. I'm curious, are there any communication strategies that you have found to be extremely effective when trying to connect with members of the communities that you work in? And if so, have you found that you needed to change these strategies based on the communities or people that you may be working with?
Do you want me to start?
Yes.
And then, so we've got about a half hour left. So Asia, what do you think about, I know we haven't got questions from you all in the room. I'd encourage you to throw them into the chat. And also over the course of the next few minutes, we'll answer this question and then evolve. Also, if you have questions about GCLI as well. So what was really fun about developing these sessions, we did one a few weeks ago, and then this conversation is that we get to tell the GCLI story through a lens of something that's topical to all of us. So I'd encourage you, take advantage of this half hour, don't hold back your questions, and we'll take advantage of this time together. So to get back to your question, Asia, about how do we connect and engage in communication strategies, man, we are not, none of us in this room, Mike and Danny and I, we're not experts at this stuff. We're learning as we go. A few things that we did was the Canopy Network has an active Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram account. So we use that as much as we can. The city's accounts are much more limited on what they can push out. Like Danny said, it kind of ends up mostly being marketing for some certain event they want to talk about. So at the Canopy Network, we more try to connect and share more. So that's one useful outlet that we use. Danny and their team created a really good City of Trees Challenge website, which was our first interface. If you just go to cityofTreesChallenge.org, and we have gone through a whole bunch of iterations, and Danny can talk about just learning how to, first it was too much information, and then we kind of trimmed it down, and it's constantly evolving. So having that, and the other thing that we do on that website is we have a spot where all the trees are mapped so people can see their trees, which is kind of cool. It uses the, what do we call the ArcGIS widget thing, Danny, that the website uses?
It's built off of ArcGIS Hub.
Yeah. So it's really slick looking, and it also, we tapped into the ecosystem service API from iTree. And when we talk about, everybody kind of captures on the number of trees. For us, it's more about the impact. So we measure the carbon sequestered, air quality improved, and that's on our website as well. So we've always felt like that's important to communicate what the trees are providing, not just the number of trees. But we're really learning as we go. I think actually Meg and I realized maybe the first time we connected Route Nashville and City of Trees Challenge was on Twitter. So those connections can organically happen as well. And when I saw what they were doing, when we first started, Route Nashville and several others were out there, and we immediately kind of globbed on to you guys and said, we like your platform. Can we work with you to make ours similar? So we're learning as we go. We don't really know. Another interesting one, I guess, and as I say it, I kind of laugh. I don't know if you guys have Nextdoor. It's like a neighborhood app. It becomes, where I live, it becomes more of a ranting app for people that are spending maybe too much time at home. But it is a way, if you want to get the citizens engaged, man, they will be on that in a heartbeat if you tell them there's trees available. So Nextdoor is kind of a tool we use. Danny, what kind of things did I miss?
You just took that in a whole other direction than I was even thinking of, but that's great just to highlight all the different ways that, and I think this is especially important for our program because it's relatively new, just make a ton of ways for people to sort of find you and get a sense of what you're even about, because that was a lot of the communication we got back. It was like, hey, I've heard about City of Trees Challenge. Like, what do you like? What's this all about? Like, how do I get a tree? And a lot of what we were doing at first wasn't, the tree giveaways was just sort of a small part of what the entire whole of what we were doing. And it's like, well, we have these giveaways, but we're also doing all this other stuff. But yeah, I mean, our communications, to your original question, what I was thinking about is just, outreach to different communities around Boise is very different. If you're talking to somebody from Boise's North End, it'd be good to talk about the which is one of our more established neighborhoods. You're talking about, the environmental benefit of these trees and things like that. You're talking to somebody, from our high impact areas. It's like, well, what can this tree do for you? What shade can it provide? That sort of thing. You just run into people just with all sorts of different considerations around trees. And it's just really interesting to see like the breadth of like ideas that people have surrounding trees and all this, things that you never even think about, of like, from just it's really interesting. So, you really have to tailor and you learn to, I think the more that we learn about the different communities around Boise, the easier it is to sort of anticipate the things that people will care about surrounding trees, and then be able to tune your message to kind of those specific needs of that community. Obviously, it's not hegemonic in any of the communities, so you have to be on your toes a little bit. But yeah, it's interesting.
Thanks, Danny.
I'll share too a little bit. Just coming from a place of humility, at least hopefully. I have a communications background, so I thought I knew what messages would work really well. But we have drastically changed a lot of our messaging based on feedback from our planting captains. And it differs so wildly from neighborhood to neighborhood. So like Danny was saying, like it's not hegemonic at all. Just as a small example, our original kind of template for our flyers just said trees for, neighborhood name. It didn't have the word free in there, because our thinking was, we don't want people to say yes because it's free. We want them to say yes because they genuinely want a tree, and we're requiring that they water it. So we want them to, have some buy-in to the process. But over and over, our captains were telling us, everybody's first question is, how much does it cost, or is it free, or what's the catch? You need to put free in there. So kind of against our kind of first instinct, we've changed some of that and altered it. And we now, instead of having kind of a template that, we kind of plug in the specific neighborhood information, we also tell the captains, what messaging do you think would work well on this? Is there something specific that you want to be included? And we'll kind of share some ideas during our trainings of what some of those messages could be, but also things have come up organically. And an example has been, there are a couple neighborhoods around waterways in Nashville, because we have a lot of tributaries and freshwater, that have flooded pretty badly over the past few years. And our captain said, like, hey, we really need to put something about how, trees can help mitigate the effects of flooding, or, can help slow down rainwater, or something like that. So our strategy has been, not our original strategy, but our strategy now has been to just really follow what the neighborhood says will work for them. And that can be, some people really like the door-to-door strategy. Ingrid, I think you did a fair amount of that, but Ingrid, I think you also just have people's phone numbers and you were just calling people too. But some neighborhoods do have really active next door groups, like Lance was saying, for better or for worse sometimes, or a really active, neighborhood Facebook group. I'm pretty sure McFerrin Park does have a pretty good Facebook strategy there too. But your strategy was a little bit of everything to get the word out, wasn't it, Ingrid?
Right. Remember, we also had an event at the community center that we utilize as a way to get the other folks who don't engage heavily on Facebook, who may not, just have a limited communication that they do daily or weekly, some even annually. So getting them out and having events at the community center was also a way of having that dialogue. Hey, we have free trees. Sometimes I can call them out. you have no trees in your house, at your yard. But, you know, most of the time it's just, we have free trees. These are your options. And the neighborhood needs some color. So we have green trees and they turn to brown. I like reds and oranges, and we're going to have a picture contest. So there you go.
I like that contest idea.
We didn't have, it wasn't a contest, was last year. So it was more of, take your picture of your favorite tree in the neighborhood. It had to be in the neighborhood. And there were so many responses. Now, I'm gonna tell you, it was because I like trees and I like colors. That's how I grew up. So I was posting the trees. So I'm like, no, we're gonna get the whole neighborhood to participate. So that's what we did. And I think this year will be a contest. Maybe we'll have some kind of voting. Who knows?
That's cool.
Yeah,
So the other folks in the room, what questions do you have for us? Are you interested in GCLI? Are you interested in starting a tree captains program? Maybe I'm going to call on Melinda, who's one of our graduates. What has this spurred in your mind about GCLI and how we all work together?
Hey, Lance, this is Sarah in California. I want to jump right into the front of the line because,
Do it.
well, that's what I always do. I think what this talk has taught me is that we've been focusing the Institute on personal, organizational, and community leadership development, but we seem to have failed to connect one another, because everything you guys have been talking about is something that I've been working on for 20 years. And we should probably figure out a way to share more of those stories and our skills and our tactics in different ways. I know that that's like technical stuff and that's not really what the Institute is about, but we should probably figure out how to build our network beyond the Vibrant Cities website, whatever, but like actually creating peer-to-peer connections about doing things that are effective. Like Nextdoor is over the top crazy productive for getting trees planted in the ground. And so many people are like shocked to hear that. And I think that's like one more aspect of the Institute that we should really focus on adding.
Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah's one of our leadership team members. She leads the logistics team and former forester in city of Denver, and now she's in Carmel by the Sea in California. And I think that brings up a good point about this institute that we got feedback from folks. We really set the stage when we started, and I said it during this conversation. You're not going to sit and listen to some expert speak at a lectern. Bless you, Ingrid. We're evolving this as we go to really serve you, and we're listening a lot. There were a lot of really organic things that we started over the course of last year that have changed how we do it. So you're going to be challenged to step up and lead immediately when you're involved in this. And you'll be challenged a lot with critical conversations around things like equity and how do we make a difference in our community. So it's a fun journey for sure. Melinda, what do you think in Washington, D.C.?
Hi, everyone. Great to see you all. And I've got with me here Haley. She is our community outreach coordinator. And she joined Casey Trees just last year. We really, the pandemic, I think made us reevaluate a lot of things. And part of the GCLI for me was really looking into leadership models and understanding things about myself and connecting with others. That's obviously, partnership is huge in how to be successful, I think, personally and in our careers too. Without it, we don't make headway. So we brought Haley on last year to really help us as we were kind of strategizing as an organization. A lot of this has been discussed, and how to be more impactful in our communities. Casey Trees has been very lucky, successful over the years since our founding in the early 2000s with planting trees, but we wanted to be more intentional. And to do that, you needed to make more connections with community members. So that's sort of been the goal. Is it challenging? Yes, it is. But Haley is working hard at building partnerships with other organizations and then developing those, kind of neighborhood groups too. But through all of this in the last year, we are getting ready to start our own kind of tree captain. We're calling them our tree ambassadors, for a couple very targeted neighborhoods where we need to have more plantings on residential property. So that's kind of where we are now. We're about to kick that off with some of our trainings, but I guess to Sarah's point too, we're only doing this because of the conversations that we've had with Meg, and making these connections over the last 8 months. That's why we're able to now start this and do this, kind of move in this direction. So it's exciting. Yeah, it's really exciting. It's also great that we're kind of coming out of the pandemic and we're getting that in-person time again, which I think we've all realized we really missed that. So that's been a big, I think, plus for moving this along.
That's awesome. Thank you, Melinda. Haley, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, I love that everyone emphasized listening. I mean, I just like to point to a moment where I had been attending this community meeting of government leaders and nonprofit leaders, as well as community members, for about a year. And then they introduced these equity tours where they visit a park space and talk about the challenges that it faces and the opportunities moving forward. And really just kind of asking that central question of, these great things could and should be happening in the park, and a lot of people have looked for this, so why isn't it happening, and trying to make it happen. And only after about a year of being in those meetings did somebody look at me and they were like, I know you've been in these meetings. And it was just so validating, so it is so important to have that presence and just make people feel like, that someone is there and someone is listening, and having that presence, and really just in the first few meetings, not even saying anything, just being like, who is this weird person in the background? It's like just absorbing, and really just figuring out how to integrate the mission of your organization with where the community is right now, and finding that spot so people know that they are being listened to, and not just surveyed to death essentially by a million agencies. So listening is so key.
That's cool. Thank you, Melinda. What do you think, Asia, as we look at about 15 minutes left to kind of wrap your thoughts around the tree captain's story and what we learned today, and then we'll answer a few more questions about GCLI and then let everybody be on their way.
Yeah, I think that's good. I was wondering if I could maybe throw one GCLI question at Meg, if that's okay. Just to ask how her participation in GCLI may have impacted how she approaches community engagement.
Yeah, definitely. So a really cool thing about the GCLI experience is that it was, because it's new, it's kind of flexible, and things are changing kind of as it goes. So there was a lot in the early curriculum and a lot of early conversation about community engagement and about DEI, which are different things, but often interact. But then, because it seemed like there was so much interest in the cohort in that topic, we ended up hitting it maybe even a lot more than the core leadership team maybe thought. And Lance and Sarah, you can chime in about whether that's true or not, but that was my impression. But because there was so much interest around that topic. So because of those conversations and lessons learned and, awesome speakers on that topic, now, I guess my framing about community engagement is a lot different than it used to be. Instead of kind of thinking about okay, end goal, trees in the ground, there's this other bubble of community engagement that we got to do too. You know, it's almost more of the foundation of everything. And like, this is what we do in order to get the trees planted. So it's kind of a reframe of thinking about what we do. And it's a lot of neighborhood work and a lot of, you know, meeting people and getting out there in order to, you know, get the trees planted, if that makes sense. And a lot of that for me came from the Green Communities Leadership Institute. Yeah.
And I might add to what Meg said, there is a portion of our curriculum that allows the cohort to evolve where we're going to go. So we had, I think, 2 more really robust conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, because when it came time to ask the cohort where you want to go with it, that's what they decided. So we went out and found an amazing speaker, and really, like I said earlier, you need to be ready to dive deep into who you are and why you do what you do, because you're going to be asked challenging questions. And we create a space for that, a safe space where you can ask those questions. And so it was really cool to see. And we were wondering, where does the cohort want to go with this? And they chose that. So it'll be interesting to see what this next cohort does. And if we're going to make a difference and address challenging community issues, we need to be able to be adapting and evolving as we go. So you'll do that all throughout the course of GCLI. But that was a great question, Asia. And Asia's new to our core leadership team too. So it's fun to hear what she's learning, and being new to the scene of what we're discussing, she's helping us evolve even more. So it's fascinating.
Hey Lance, this is Sarah again. I have to say that the on-site portion of the Institute was quite possibly the most uncomfortable thing I have ever endured. And it completely opened my mindset into a whole new world of how to approach everything around a community. And you know, the next group, the next cohort might have a completely different experience, but it was, I mean, Meg, you could probably say that it was pretty powerful.
That's
Sometimes a
really
little
good
bit
point.
of discomfort can be good, I think, Sarah, for sure.
Yes, no, I'm glad you mentioned that, Sarah. And that's why I say we use exercises like the Enneagram that does more than just a personality test. It's more of really diving into who you are and why you do what you do. So sometimes it feels a little bit like therapy, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Be comfortable, come in. You need to be ready to grow. If you're not ready to grow, it's not for you. But the relationships now that we have, and I hopefully see it in this room, like Meg and I and Sarah and Asia and Jimmy, it's fun, but it's also challenging. And now, you know, you have friends all over the country. And like I said, we've got a handful of applicants that have asked internationally, so that it might go international as well, which would be fun.
I think we should hear from Jimmy. Jimmy, are you still on the phone?
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, go for it, Jimmy.
Yeah, no, I've just been taking it in. And yeah, I will definitely echo that sentiment that Sarah brought up. You know, I think the greatest growth in my personal and professional career has come from those times when I've been most uncomfortable. I don't think we are ever going to really move the needle in any direction if we continue to just sort of stay complacent and in a happy place. And I remember during GCLI to that, when we had to identify, I guess it was a list of traits, and then we had to kind of narrow that down to the qualitative adjectives, I guess, that best described, I don't know, our ethos or who we were. And I couldn't really find one in that long list, but basically I said to the people next to me that, that idea of being uncomfortable was something I really enjoyed, or that I identified in my life, because it really allowed me to find who my real partners were in something that I was going to move forward, or who the people were that thought completely different from me. And, you know, those those moments only seem to occur when you challenge the norm and when you create this atmosphere where it causes people to really be honest about who they are. And so anyway, I know it's a bit of a segue, but I think that whole portion of GCLI that dealt with us sort of coming to terms with who we are and not just kind of putting on a smile and glossing over our accomplishments was as rewarding as anything that I could have sat through. So anyway, I'll just add that 2 cents for now.
Love it. Thanks, Jimmy. So we have just a few minutes left. Let's see. I'm going to pop up a screen here and put more questions if you have them. This is our website. Encourage you to connect with us and engage with us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Share your stories and then submit your application by September 30th. This is us last year at Oregon State University, and we'll have a crowd like this together in Knoxville, Tennessee. You'll see it's a diverse group of ages and experiences. The other thing that I'll tell you is this topic today was focused on urban forestry related topics and how to engage communities. We do have a lot of urban forestry folks involved in Leadership Institute, but it's also well beyond that, and that's very intentional. One of our graduates is from what we call the blue economy. He works in fisheries up in Alaska. We had a Boise State University professor that was involved and does a bunch of hazard resilience work. She's actually a volcanologist. So we're trying to really, in order for the people that are involved in our communities to adapt and learn and evolve, we've got to go well beyond our comfort sphere, right? And when we look at urban forestry, which I think everybody here is involved with, we are now on the forefront of climate action. We are now involved in things much bigger than urban forestry. So to spread our wings and learn from those folks is hugely valuable, and it's a ton of fun to do it. So I'd encourage you to apply if you're interested. It is a competitive process. If you are selected, we'll let you know in November. There may be some scholarship opportunities potentially, but it costs $1,800 to become a member of the Institute, and then you will need to pay your travel to Knoxville, Tennessee. So those are the two expenses. But yeah, it's exciting, it's fun. It's only the second year, so you can be another early adopter. And I really appreciate Asia, you facilitating the conversation, Meg for putting it all together, Ingrid for joining us. And we've got a few more minutes for questions. But thank you, this is a fun conversation. Ingrid, do you have anything to add or any closing thoughts from your perspective? I appreciate you making time today.
Closing thoughts. Well, first, thank you for having me. I think this has been Meg for inviting me as a guest. I think this is wonderful. I'm hopefully becomes the best type of wildfire of maybe greenery fire that goes across the country, and more people are seeing or enlightened of what needs to be done. I don't know. Some of you may not know that I come from New York, not the city. It's the neighboring county, Westchester County, and I live in the river. So my life was greenery, water, nature. That's where my passion lies. But I want everybody to have access to that. And I see so many areas in more urban development. It is people are not seeing that associating money with land, and that's not the way that I associate land, just being a dollar sign. I see so much that could give back. And my next thing is actually doing some kind of growth. We have a desert here for grocery stores, but I'm like, you know what? I got empty lots. I got to find out who the owners are and see if I can do something to put a garden here. We already have a garden at one of the schools, and we just need to another level, have it more structured. And so I don't have a couple miles on the other side of the community to get tomatoes and other healthier food options. So
I love it, Ingrid. I need to get down to Nashville. You're a person that sees a problem and comes up with a solution.
Yes,
I love it. Thank you for joining us.
thank you.
Asia, Meg, you guys want to close it out?
I'll just say thank you all for the invitation to join and be a part of this conversation. And Lance, one thing you said is going to stick with me. I think between Lance's remarks, Jimmy and Sarah, right? So sometimes these conversations are very uncomfortable, but like Meg said, they force growth. And I think that we can be honest about the discomfort and the growth when we create the safe space for the conversations to happen. And I think, you know, having these types of rough but like growth inducing conversations within the GCLI community is important. And I think that that's just empowers us to go out into our like lived in communities and do the same thing, have a little bit of uncomfortable conversations with, you know, listening to folks, getting to know the heartbeat of the community, but at the end, it leads to growth, whether that includes growth in canopy cover or community growth on a broader scale, but it's the discomfort is worth it. And I think this conversation was like a really healthy reminder of that. So I feel kind of inspired myself.
Awesome. Thank you, Asia. Meg, anything before we wrap it up?
Just thanks, everybody. And it was a lot of fun. And we'll send out recording afterwards and include emails in there as well, but would be very happy to stay connected. And applications are due September 30th.
Awesome. Thank you, Meg. You'll get a follow-up email from me with all that stuff. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks.
Hey, Meg. Thank you, Meg and Asia, very much. This has been really good. I'm going to stop recording.